My name is Jim. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jim.
It's an honor and a privilege and a hell of an inconvenience to be here. Mary and I had a nice drive down the coast to be here, and we had a lovely dinner with Richard and Neil and in the OC, is that CO? CO restaurant down the street. And so far, it's been a fairly decent evening. I can spoil that for you in a few minutes. Welcome to the newcomers, and congratulations to the birthday people. You're living proof that Alcoholics Anonymous works, and it works real well. First time I got drunk, I was 12 years old. I was living on the family farm, which was 40 acres of yellow clay hills you couldn't raise a damn dust storm on, north of Sioux City, Iowa. It's not the end of the world, but you could see it from there. I was visiting my cousin in town around Christmas time, and we had the peanuts and the candy and all the goodies you have around Christmas time, and I found a quart of slow gin around the house there, and I drank that quart of slow gin after eating a half a pound of Spanish peanuts. And I re-stuccoed my cousin's house. 25 years later, I was taking a little nap on my kitchen floor up in Ojai, California. 2:30 a.m. I had closed the bar, as I did hundreds and hundreds of times. And I'd had a late dinner, which consisted of a cold chicken leg out of the refrigerator. And I had a quart of Mogan David wine, cold Mogan David wine, which I drank entirely. And I'm lying on my back on the kitchen floor, throwing up straight up in the air. And trying to dodge the wine mist that was drifting down. I can tell there's a few other mist dodgers in here today. And those are the first and the last drunks that I've ever had in my life. And I drank after that second drunk, but that was my last real bad drunk. I went to school like everybody else. I got out of high school in 1952, close to the bottom of my class. And I got polio in August of that year. I graduated in June. I got polio in August of 1952. Lost the use of my legs pretty much, and a lot of my sense of humor. And I was hospitalized for 105 days. I got out of the hospital walking on crutches and braces, and I was a pretty pissed off kid, I can tell you that. I thought, you know, just getting out of high school, I thought my life had just begun, and now I knew it was all over. So I drank a lot of beer, and that seemed to take the edge off of things. And I wasn't going anywhere. I had nothing going for me whatsoever. I was working in a gas station before that, selling gas for 25 cents a gallon for premium and 16 cents for regular. Tells you something about how old I am. So one day, a guy from the Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Department came to my house, and he said, "We'd like to talk to you about going to college." And I laughed at the guy. I said, "Jesus, I just barely made it out of high school. I don't know what I'd ever do in a college. And besides, I don't think I want your charity. Thank you very much." I was a little pissed off, a little bitter. He said, "We're not talking about charity. We're talking about making you into a taxpayer." The odd thing to say, I thought, you know. So I said, "Well, if you want me to be a taxpayer, to hell with it. I'll go and be a taxpayer." So I ended up going to this little college in eastern Iowa for 3 years, studied political science. Seemed to like political science a lot. I still am obsessed with it, I might as well tell you. And so the political science instructor said to me one day, "McNally, you have a kind of a weird linear way of thinking. Have you ever thought about being a lawyer?" I hadn't up to that point, but I started thinking about it all the time. I'm an alcoholic. I tend to pick up obsessions fairly quick. So after 3 years of college, I went over to Omaha, Nebraska to study law with the Jesuit fathers over there at Creighton University. And it was a tough school, very tough school, too tough for me. The first grades came out after about 6 weeks, and I didn't do well. You know, I had a suit and a tie on, and I acted like I wanted to be a lawyer and all that crap. But the grades came out, and I didn't do well. Now, it never occurred to me that nobody else did well either. They were trying to break our little egos down so we might learn something. But I took it personally. I'm an alcoholic. They were picking on me. So I took off the suit and tie and went back to the bars, and in less than a year at that school, I drank my way completely out of that school. They didn't want to even talk to me again. So I bummed around New York City for a summer and re-enrolled in law school at the University of South Dakota, which is in the town of Vermillion, and I know you've all been there. Vermillion is a population of 5,000 and probably 35,000 when the university is in session. Now that really is the end of the world. I mean, Vermillion, South Dakota is the end of the world. And I got out of that law school in 1961 with a degree. I got licensed to practice in Iowa, and I started practicing in an old real estate firm. And I was examining abstracts of title to real property. Now that put in plain language, I was examining the history of this piece of dirt. It might be a farm, it might be a commercial establishment, it might be a residence property. My job was to examine the history of that piece of dirt, going back to the original government patent, which is when we stole it from the Indians, and bring forward every page, study every page, and at the end of it, write an opinion about who you believe owns the property. That's what a title opinion is. I didn't give a damn who owned the property. I couldn't care less who owned the damn property. I was in the bars every night, and I was sick, sorry, and hungover every day. And I didn't care who owned the damn property. And it was next to watching corn grow, it's the dullest job in the whole world, you know. So I got a call from Donald O'Brien, who was the U.S. District Attorney. He'd just been appointed by John Kennedy. And he said, I'd like to have you come over here and be my assistant, if you wouldn't mind. I said, I'd like to start tomorrow if I can. And he said, no, you got to go through a little investigation. So that happened, and I got appointed Assistant U.S. District Attorney for the Northern District of Iowa when I was 28 years old. Wow. And I had Justice Department credentials and a big gold badge and all that stuff, and I thought I was pretty hot shit. But you know, the only thing that changed about my life, the only thing that really changed, first of all, I was making a little more money. The second thing was that now I'm falling off a little better bar stools. I'm in the uptown upholstered places with the nice upholstered step and the padded bar stools. When you fall off one of those, you don't hurt yourself quite as much as you do when you fall off the brass, hit the brass rail with your ribs. And that's really all that changed about my life. Well, I was there a few years, and John Kennedy was assassinated, and Lyndon Johnson became the President of the United States. And we didn't like Lyndon Johnson so well. And so I decided in 1964 to run for the state Senate. And if you drink as much as I drank, you'll get ideas like that. So I got on the ballot in 1964. I got married in June of that year to an unsuspecting, lovely woman, and who had no idea what she was getting into. And I got on the ballot, and I started campaigning in the bars as God intended us to do. And you know, it was 1964, and not many of you were old enough to remember that actual election, but that was the year that Lyndon Johnson was running at the top of the Democratic ticket and Barry Goldwater was running at the top of the Republican ticket. And Lyndon Johnson won that election by a huge landslide, carrying himself and a lot of other incompetents into office, including me. So I woke up the day after election, sick, sorry, and hungover as usual, and sure enough, I've been elected to the Iowa Senate. And what do you do now? You know? Well, one of our brethren had run for the Iowa House of Representatives. Iowa has a House of Representatives like California has an assembly, and they have a Senate like California has a Senate. This guy campaigned from one bar. The name of the bar was the Cornhusker Lounge. You can imagine what kind of a joint that was. Anybody in there with a whole face was a tourist. Anyway, when he got elected in the landslide, he was heard to remark, now that I'm a representative, am I supposed to report to Des Moines or Washington, D.C.? He didn't know if he was a state or a federal legislator. That's no joke. And I don't think he ever quite found out. Well, I moved my wife to Des Moines and set up headquarters at the Savory Hotel Bar, where all the high-level government business was being done, which means that that's where all the legislators were going to get drunk every day. And it wasn't a happy time. I was drinking every night. My wife was not happy about my being out all the time, but I had all this high-level government business to do, you know, in the bars. And we had our first child in March of '65. And, you know, the one significant accomplishment that I can claim from that legislative experience is Harold Hughes was the governor of Iowa at that time. Harold Hughes was a sober alcoholic in AA. And he was really opposed to this hypocrisy of illegal alcohol in Iowa. So we legalized liquor by the drink in Iowa. I'd call that one signal victory. And the other thing is we classified beer as a food so that it could be sold in the grocery stores. I call those major legislative accomplishments. Well, I got paranoid. I was drinking a lot every day, and I didn't eat much. I was having, my idea of dinner was a pepperoni and a hard-boiled egg on that, out of that dirty bottle on the bar, and I was having a lot of serious problems, physical problems. My blood sugar was out of sight. My cholesterol was 450 or something like that. And it was just nuts, totally nuts. And so I left the legislature after one term and became a lobbyist. Now, that's a better job than being a legislator if you're a drunk, because I was paid a lot of money to do nothing but party with the members of the legislature all day, every day. And when they would pass out or go home at night, I would party with the barmaids and the bartenders and anybody else that wanted to party. And it was a hell of a job. It was a wonderful job. And we actually accomplished a few things. I can't remember them, but I was doing that, and I might be doing it yet, except that my physical being was rejecting alcohol. You know, you cannot stay drunk all the time, no matter how hard you try or no matter how much willpower you got. Your body will ultimately reject alcohol, sometimes spectacularly from both ends. And, I was getting real sick from drinking a lot of booze every day, and I went to my local doctor, and he said, do you drink a lot? And I said, well, I have an occasional social drink. Boy. And he didn't know what to do with me, so he sent me up to Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, a very fine medical institution. And they asked me dumb questions like, do you drink a lot? And I said, I have an occasional social drink. They wrote it down. They don't have any reason to challenge what you tell them. You've paid them thousands of dollars to get an honest opinion from them, and they don't expect you to lie to them. They call it a history. So they wrote down occasional social drink. Well, the symptoms were inconsistent with what I was telling them, for sure. After 3 days, they came around and they said, we think we know what's wrong with you. And I thought, well, this will be fun. This will be fun. So what do you think's wrong with me, Doc? And he says, we think you have executive stress syndrome. Boy, that sounds pretty damn heavy weight. You know, I like that. And I said, what do you do about executive stress syndrome? And he said, well, we have these blue tablets, 10 milligram Valium tablets. They said, you seem quite anxious. Why don't you take some of these blue tablets whenever you feel anxious? I felt anxious all the time. So I took them all the time. And I drank a lot of booze on top of them. You know, if you drink a lot of booze and you eat a lot of Valium, some days you'll get so serene you won't be able to hit your ass with either hand. That's exactly what happened to me. And, you know, it wasn't going good at all. It was going very, very badly. Well, things can always get a little worse. July 3rd of 1968, my wife and by this time 3-year-old daughter and I are traveling on the freeway between Omaha, Nebraska and Des Moines on Interstate 80. When a lady rear-ended us doing about 95 miles an hour, booted us off a high embankment, rolled us over 7 times end over end. My wife was thrown out of the vehicle and killed that day on the freeway. So I ended up in a dry creek bed with my daughter, and the vehicle was on fire. And some U.S. mail truck drivers pulled us out of that car. My daughter was not injured at all. I had a broken shoulder and a bunch of broken ribs and cuts and bruises and nothing life-threatening. But I had you know, I couldn't believe what had happened. I was completely devastated by that. And, you know, I did the only thing that an alcoholic knows how to do. I got drunk. I stayed drunk for 30 or 60 days. I can't remember. I wasn't counting. And finally, you know, I came to, sitting on the edge of my bed. Now, I hadn't been drinking the morning of that accident, which was astonishing to me. But I came to and had one of those keen alcoholic insights that we have, you know. And if you have one of these, call your sponsor right away, because you can take action based on one of these insights that will change your life forever, not necessarily for the better. It came to me suddenly that all the trouble I'd ever had in my life had occurred in Iowa. Now that's called linear thinking. That's just one side of the problem, you know. And so the answer, if you have that kind of a conclusion, the answer is obvious. Get the hell out of Iowa. So I convinced my elderly mother that things would be better in California. And it's like that little story about of mice and men. It's going to be better in California, Lenny, you know. And so we moved up to Ojai, California, north of L.A., about 85, 90 miles. And right away I found the Firebird Tavern up there and spent 3 years sitting in the Firebird Tavern sucking up their suds and their booze. And you know, nothing was changing. I was studying for the California bar. I got through the California bar. But I was still a common barroom drunk. And that hadn't changed at all. Well, I got licensed to practice in California, and I started doing criminal defense work down in Ventura in an old frame house that I converted into an office. And I was actually having some pretty good luck. And if there's anybody in here that I represented in those days, I'm glad you're out. I'm glad you're finally out. Well, you know, it was really, I'd like to be able to express in words the desperate years and years and years of the same shit. You know, when people tell me, I don't like those AA meetings, they're very boring. They always talk about the same goddamn things all the time. I say, you never went to some of the bars I went to. I mean, there's a guy in the bar, he's probably still in the bar in Sioux City, Iowa, saying after about 12 drinks, Jim, let me tell you about the time I played in the Rose Bowl in 1936. Jesus Christ. If I hear that one more time, I'm going to strangle this guy. But, you know, that's just how it was. And it was boring, boring, boring. And I can remember walking around for 25 years with a headache and diarrhea. That's what I remember about my career as a drunk. And, you know, all the crap that goes with it, the trying to explain to people why you didn't show up for this court appearance or whatever it might be. And, you know, it was not a good time. It was a bitch of a time. Well, you know, one day, I used to sleep under my desk in the office because if you're a criminal defense lawyer, you cross-examine police officers a lot, highway patrol, police, probation officers. And your job is to humiliate them as best you can to make them discredited, so that the jury will not believe them. That's your job. And they remember that if they, if you see them on the freeway at night, they will remember you, guarantee you. So I wouldn't get out on the freeway. I would go back to my office in Ventura and crawl under the desk, which I had a big old conference table. I made it into a desk. And I'd crawl in there fully clothed and go to sleep. Pass out is a better word. And wake up in the morning and, you know, try to come to enough to sit in my chair and pretend like I was practicing law. And one day I crawled off my desk and picked up the Ventura paper, and there's a story in there about the Sarah Retreat House in Malibu, which had burned down in a fire, partially burned in a fire in 1970. By now it's 1971. And there's a phone number you can call if you want to make a spiritual retreat. Now, I'd been on retreats before. I was raised in a major religion, and I was still hung up on that stuff. And so I called this place, and a nice woman answered the phone and said, you know, you could make a spiritual retreat this weekend if you wanted to. She said, the one this weekend is for alcoholics. There's a long silence on my end of the phone. Finally, I said to her, I'm not an alcoholic, but I'll come anyway. You know, keep your options open. You never know. Well, I had tried everything else. I'd gone to psychiatrists. I'd tried religion. I'd tried everything. And nothing worked for me. I tried reading inspirational books and pop psychology paperbacks. You know, you can read 14 of them, and it's like Chinese food. You're hungry an hour later, and they don't have any effect on your life. You know. So I went down to this retreat on a Friday night, and I didn't see any alcoholics. Like I said when I walked up here tonight, or when I came up here tonight. I said, I don't see any alcoholics. These people don't look like alcoholics to me. Rudy, I'll have to meet Rudy after the meeting. But they didn't look like alcoholics, because I knew alcoholics. I'd represented a lot of alcoholics. They're driving into people head on. They're cutting on people. They're shooting them. They're doing every kind of crazy thing you can imagine. I had a client who used to drive a tractor down the main street of Ojai drunk, a big tractor, scraping the blade on the ground and making sparks all over hell. And cops would throw him into jail, and he didn't know where he was. He was totally drunk. But I knew what alcoholics looked like, and these guys didn't look like alcoholics to me. So they persuaded me to stay for the weekend, and I went to their AA meeting grudgingly on Saturday night. First one I'd ever been to, and I was amazed at what I heard. These guys were talking about geographical cures for alcoholism, going from one state to the other. Geographical cures and blackout drinking, of which I'd done a whole bunch. And, and the night terrors, that was one that got me really good, because I used to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning sitting up straight up in my bed and the hair standing up on the back of my neck, scared shitless. I had no idea what I was afraid of. I had the alcoholic terrors. And so they were reading my mail. When it came my turn to speak, I said, "I'm Jim, I'm an alcoholic." And I didn't even know I'd said it hardly. But I sure as hell didn't believe it. I think I just wanted to belong somewhere. And after the meeting, these two old birds, the good cop and the bad cop, got a hold of me, these two old timers. And they said, the good cop said, if you feel like you might have a drinking problem, just go to some AA meetings when you get back to Ventura, and maybe you can find something there you can use. The bad cop says, "I think you're going to do some more drinking, but we've screwed it up so you won't enjoy it anymore." They were both right. I went back to Ventura, I got drunk, I got sick again, and finally called a guy named Bud G. Bud G was an old-time, crusty old AA guy. He'd been in AA a long time, and he was a counselor in the courts, and I knew him through that acquaintance. And I said, "Bud, I think I might have the beginning of a little tiny drinking problem." And he said, "We know." "We know? Jesus, how could you possibly know that?" "Well, you can't be the town drunk and keep it a secret, hardly." So I said, "Well, what do you think I ought to do?" And he said, "I think you ought to go to an AA meeting today." I said, "Today? I'm busy. I might go Thursday or Friday." But he said, "You're not busy. Go today." So where would I go? And he said, "There's a meeting at 3 o'clock at the Norman and Cooper Manor in Oxnard." I'd never heard of the place. Sounded pretty fancy to me. A manor, Jesus, that's to the manor born, sounds pretty fancy. So I got in my dinged-up alcoholic Cadillac. I have my bullshit three-piece lawyer suit on, and I roll over to this Norman and Cooper Manor. It is the worst nightmare you can possibly imagine. Before you come to AA, you may have some prejudices about AA, like a bunch of people sitting around thumping on a Bible or beating on a drum or something, and talking about visions or rolling in the aisles or something. I don't know what I thought, but this was the worst thing I could possibly imagine. There's 12 or 13 old apostles sitting around a scarred table with a bare fly-specked light bulb hanging down over in the room. They got their blue terry cloth robes and their flip-flop shoes on. And they're as old as I am now, and that's pretty damned old. And the head leper is reading from a blue book. and he is saying, "If you want what we have." I thought to myself, if I don't get out of here in a minute, I may get what he has. So I left and I went back to Bud and I said, "Bud, why the hell did you send me to this low-bottom place?" I said, "These people are genetic misfits, They are rowing with one oar in the water." And he wasn't happy about my reaction to the meeting. He wasn't happy at all. He said, "Well, they have meetings for big shots in Beverly Hills," and he walked away. Jesus, that sounds a little harsh. Well, maybe he's right. So I asked him how to get to the Beverly Hills meeting. And that Friday night, I drove 75 miles to the Rodeo Drive group of Alcoholics Anonymous in Beverly Hills. And I must have passed 10 or 15 perfectly good AA meetings on the way down there. I didn't know that. I only thought there was, the Malibu meeting, and then there was the Norman and Cooper Manor, and now there's the Beverly Hills meeting. So I God, I can't believe it. I go up there and I noticed that it's a big fancy church and there's a lot of fancy automobiles outside, you know, Maseratis and Mercedes-Benzes and the whole trip. And I go inside and there's a lot of beautiful women and very well-dressed men, and God, I thought, this is more like it. This is really where I fit, I think, you know. If you have a little grandiosity, you will fit there too. So I started going to the meetings down there on Friday night, and on September 10 of 1971, I went to an AA meeting there, and there was a gorgeous woman giving a 10-minute talk. And I decided that she had what I wanted and would go to any lengths to get. So I invited her out to coffee after the meeting. She gave a good talk, 10-minute talk. I invited her out to coffee after the meeting, and I'm amazed to this day that she went. She had her 10-year-old daughter with her, and it was her natal birthday. And we started talking on the phone and dating, and 87 days later we were married. Boy meets girl on the AA campus. And last December 3rd, we were married 36 years. Married right here in the front row. Now, she had 2 children, I had 1, and we put those kids together, and they didn't mix too good. But, you see, marriage was not a cure for alcoholism. I was still drinking. And I still had this insanity that goes like this. Just get off my back. Give me a little more time. I'll take care of this. You'll notice the word I is prominent in that sentence. Well, I kept trying to take care of it, and nothing worked. Nothing worked for me. I'd never really tried to stop drinking before now. And now I was really trying to stop drinking. I couldn't stop. I could not stop drinking, and it scared me to death. I thought, Jesus, do you suppose these people are right that if you're an alcoholic, you cannot stop drinking on your own? You suppose they were really serious about that crap? Well, I'll make it a short story. I had to keep on drinking until I came to the realization that I was never, ever going to be sober. I knew for sure I was going to be one of those losers they talked about in AA that was going to die drunk. And I had seen a number of people die in horrible ways through alcoholism. And Mary and I used to do a lot of 12-step work. They don't do much of it anymore, but Jesus, it's, you know, we 12-stepped a guy that we took him to a drying out place, and when we're taking him over there, he's seeing angels in the streetlights, you know, going over there. And he got out of the drying out place 3 days later, went and got a bottle of wine and sat in his car and drank the wine and had an esophageal hemorrhage. Boom, died quick, 5 seconds. And so we went to his funeral, and if Mary and I hadn't been there, there would have been only 2 people at the funeral. His mother and the minister that was appointed by the county to preside over his funeral. He had a little pressed wood box, they call it a coffin. He was buried in the Potter's Field in Santa Paula. And that's, you know, that's just one end of the spectrum of alcoholism. But anyway, I kept drinking, and I just gave up totally on ever getting sober. I said, screw it. If I'm an alcoholic, I'm going to die drunk. Let's have at it. So I'd go down to the Firebird. I'd go to a lot of meetings. I heard a lot of good speakers. I heard Chuck C. I heard Norm Alpy. I heard all kinds of great speakers and good, solid AAs. But it didn't seem to apply to me. And then one night I went into the Firebird and had a bottle of Coors and half of another one. And for a reason, I emphasize the word reason that I cannot give you tonight, I just shoved the second half of that bottle of beer back on the bar and walked out of the place. Never to have another drink till this day. That was March 30th, 1972. That's 36 years ago. And amazing. I'm as amazed as anybody, because I'd like to claim a little credit for that. You know, if you have the ego that I have, you'd like to say, well, you know, it was really, I know down deep it was really because I did this. That'd all be bullshit. That's all bullshit. The obsession to drink alcohol was removed from me that day, period, and has not been returned to this day. That's as simple as I can make it. I'm not a big, religious person or any of that kind of stuff, but that's what happened. I had surrendered when I came to believe that I was a dead duck. That was my first step. That's when I admitted I was totally licked. There was nothing, period, end of paragraph, that I could do about my alcoholism. That's the first step. It was for me. Well, I had my last drink on March 30th, 1972, and everything became a sea of tranquility, and I've lived happily ever after. Lying is one of the last things to go. But, it got better slowly, very, very slowly. If I can tell you anything at all about recovery tonight, it's that it's damn slow. And we went to a lot of meetings. We started sponsoring people and speaking around AA meetings. And, 2 years I'm sober, and my sister Jean calls me from New Jersey. She's an MD back there, and she says to me, "You an alcoholic?" I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "What's your definition of an alcoholic?" She's an intellectual. I said, "An alcoholic is anybody that drinks more than their doctor does." She didn't think that. She said, "That's not a bit funny." I said, "I think it's very funny." So she said, "What did you do about your alcoholism?" I said, "Well, I went to AA and bought the big book and read it. Took the steps. Haven't had a drink for 2 years." I sent her a big book. She read it, went to AA, and she's sober 34 years now. So that was a beautiful thing. She and I are the only 2 out of 5 in that family that are alcoholics, and we're both in recovery. But it got better and better and better, and we started being real active in AA. And my practice started blossoming. If you show up every day sober, it'll have an amazing effect on your business. And 10 years go by, just like magic. And one day I'm trying a case in court, in Superior Court in Ventura County, and I looked up there and I go, nobody in this room. This guy up on the bench is the only one in this room that doesn't seem to be working at all. Everybody else is out there busting their ass to prove something or disprove something, and the judge is up there saying, "Sustained, overruled." Doesn't seem to be doing a damn thing. So I said to myself, that would be a good job to have. The easier, softer way, right? So I made application to be appointed to the Superior Court in Ventura County in 1982, and they sent me a 32-page questionnaire, which I filled out and carefully. And one of the questions was, is there anything about your life the governor needs to know in considering you for appointment? Well, I had to tell the truth. I said, I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous for 10 years. I don't share that at the level of press, radio, films, or TV, and I hope the governor won't either. Oh, that's a smart-ass answer, I know that. But I had no real expectation of ever getting the appointment. So they sent a commission, 4 lawyers from Sacramento down to question me about my alleged qualifications for this job. And they had some very hard questions. We had a good interview for a couple of hours. And finally, one of the ladies on the commission said, "Mr. McNally, you say you're a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous for 10 years. How do we know for sure you won't show up drunk some Monday morning if you're placed on the bench?" Hard question. I said, I can't promise you that I will not show up drunk some Monday morning. Because when I was promising people I wouldn't show up drunk, I was showing up drunk. I won't promise you that I won't show up drunk. But if I keep doing what I've been doing as faithfully as I've been doing it for 10 years, there's a reasonable chance that I won't show up drunk. It's as good as I can tell you. Well, I thought my next thought was, this rigorous honesty bullshit just cost you that job. Well, it didn't. I was appointed in 1982. I served for 12 and a half years, and it was the best and the worst job I've ever had in my life. Wow. My anonymity lasted about 2 weeks. Yeah. I was first assigned to juvenile delinquency cases, the young kids that are in trouble with the criminal law. And there was a kid in this court that was on probation, and I knew him from the AA meetings. I'd seen him many times at AA meetings. He was doing fine. So I thought there's no reason to keep him on probation. He's doing fine. So I took him off probation. And he said, "Can I come up and shake your hand?" He came up, shook my hand, and turns to a courtroom full of people and says, "Thanks, Judge. I'll see you at the AA meeting tonight."
Yeah.
All I could say was, so much for anonymity. Well, you know, that breach of anonymity changed my whole relationship with the prosecutors, the defense lawyers, the Court of Appeals, everybody. People were representing drunks, wanted to get them into my courtroom. They thought I'd cut them some slack, and I would. I've sent many, many people to AA, NA, CA, GA. They even sent a woman to Al-Anon one night. She was buying this poor guy a gallon of wine every day. He was dying. He was dying of alcoholism. I said, "You got to quit doing that." The only way I know for you to quit doing that is go to Al-Anon. So I sent her to Al-Anon. But, you know, I used to get delegations of leading deacons from AA, and they'd say, "You're sending these damn people to AA, and they're disrupting our meetings." And I'd say, "Why don't you kick them out of the meetings if they're disrupting your meetings?" "Well, the courts are sending them." So that doesn't mean that we don't have any authority over AA. We only have authority over the poor bastard that we're sending there. If they're disrupting your meetings, kick them out of the meetings. And plus, if you don't want people to have their court cards signed at your meeting, take a group conscience and don't sign court cards. If you don't sign court cards at your meeting, we won't send our people to your meeting. Well, that seemed to satisfy them because I never had another delegation after that. But I got to wind this up pretty quick. I'll tell you one story about a guy that was on felony probation, and I sent him to 5 AA meetings a week, period. Written proof of attendance to the probation officer. He comes back in 6 months. He's got 200 signatures on his card. The only problem is they're all in the same handwriting. in the same pen. And they're supposed to represent 200 different meetings, many different types of meetings. So I said to him, "You went to all 200 of these meetings?" "Yes, I did." I said, "Do they ever read what they call the 12 steps at any of those meetings?" He said, "Yes, sir, about every one." I said, "If you can recite any one of the 12 steps, any one of the 12, I'll take you off probation." And he said, "Well, there's something about God in there or something." So I say to anybody that's here on a court card, for Christ's sake, if you're here on a court card and you don't want to go to the meetings, it might just cost you your life not to go to the meetings. But hey, when you have to consider the possibility of deep alcoholic death or living on a spiritual basis, it may not be an easy choice. So my advice would be, sign it yourself or get a whole bunch of your friends to sign it, but use a different pen. And get different handwriting samples, And don't go in front of a judge that's an old-time member of AA if you can help it. Well, I got to quit. And what I've got to say is that I've taken all 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, the only reason I'm sober today, having taken all 12 of the steps. And I've had a spiritual awakening as the result of taking all 12 of the steps. And I hasten to add that my spiritual awakening has not been of the Bill Wilson style of illumination, sudden illumination. My experience of spirituality has been of the slow, educational, painful variety, as referred to in Appendix 2 of the Big Book. I had a God of my understanding when I came in here, an angry old white guy in the sky that would drop you into a pool of everlasting fire for some goddamn small infractions. Pardon my vulgarity. Pardon my vulgarity. For some real little chicken manure infractions. And I'm almost embarrassed to tell you I hung on to that higher power for 18 and a half years. Now, I was deeply impressed as a child, as the Big Book says, by this higher power. When I was 18 and a half years sober, I said, this isn't working. This is just BS. How do you turn your will and your life over to the care of somebody you think is lurking out there beyond Uranus? That used to be a planet, by the way. And How do you turn your will and your life over to somebody like that? You don't. It's very simply stated, you don't. So I had to let go of that old higher power. The one I have today is I simply refer to as the healing power of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's as close as I can come to describing God of my understanding. The healing power of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I'd like to invite the blessing of that higher power on all of us tonight.
Thank you.